Hello world of YouTube, Superjet Spade here. Back in 2021, I did my first ever Q&A session. At the time, I had used the Plotagon version of my Elf Sona.
Back in 2017 and 2018, my inspirations would have probably come from anything composed by Tim Follin, Matt Furniss, Naoki Kodaka, and Konami to name a few.
And I decided to do another Q&A session where I respond to your questions with my own voice. I got questions from my Discord, YouTube, and Blue Sky, so let's start. But before I do start, I do want to apologize if I mispronounce your usernames. I know that it's bound to happen, and you're free to correct me if I don't pronounce your usernames right. So, with that out of the way, I'll start answering your questions. First and foremost, I will answer this one from Mega by saying that, yes, I am okay. So far, 2025 has been a little rocky for me and my family, given that we had to pack up and move somewhere else in January. But besides that, we are hanging in there. Lee Kaisho asks, what composer turned out the most influential of your music? I can think of many, but I think Shinji Hosoe and Ayato Sasso were my first and biggest influences towards my music. These two had composed music for some amazing arcade games of the 90s, such as Ridge Racer and Street Fighter EX. As for non-video game stuff, last year I got inspired by a 1999 drum and bass album called Movements by Innervation. I very much liked how each song was structured. That led me to start a Namco C219 tune that I have yet to finish. I will link the YouTube upload of this album below for you to check out. The way each song transitions into each other is the best part of the album, in my opinion. 64 the Third asks about my opinion on ham sandwiches. Well, they are fine. I usually like the addition of cheese and mayo for a variety of flavor, but if none of those are available, just a few slices of ham between two slices of bread are fine if I want to have a quick snack or something. By the way, I am no longer vegan, so I do eat actual ham now, but I am still open-minded when it comes to vegan alternatives to food items. Subsuming Vortex, who also goes by Tempest64, asks, have you ever seen a song of yours covered so much that you got tired of it? If so, which ones? I honestly don't mind if only one of my songs gets covered multiple times. As far as I know, there are 5 different versions of my song Processing Plant. The original PC Engine version, which I did in 2018, a Core Gadget remake of it I did in 2020, a Pokey cover by Vince Cool, a Commodore 64 cover by Esteban Trujillo, and an SAA 1099 cover by Burnt Fishy, the last of which is unfortunately lost to time. And as for other songs, I know how much you like my song Mint Condition Tempest 64, and your Super Nintendo cover of it is still amazing, so I probably wouldn't mind if that one got covered to oblivion. I do understand if you are someone who composed a lot of originals, but only one of them gets covered by a bunch of people, but sometimes you just need to appreciate that the one tune got folks interested in your stuff. Leafy Potato Style asked me 2 questions. The first one they asked me is, when will you know you've made it? Well, to be honest, I don't know when I will consider to have made it. I could say that I made it when I achieved 1,000 subscribers back in 2020, or when I revealed my voice to you all back in September 2024, or the time that I was brought on to make 3 songs for Sega Genesis homebrew game back in 2021. I guess the answer I will give to this question is I am content with where I am now, and will happily find opportunities whenever they come. As for your second question about which Mega Man game I think is the best music-wise, I am kind of torn between Mega Man 7, 8, X, and the Super Nintendo version of Rockman and Forte. All these games have at least a few songs that I like, and I can't decide which one has the best in terms of music. Dark Shamil Khan asks, what's the best song you think you have covered? After thinking for some time, I think the best song I have ever covered was Theme of Simon Belmont from Super Castlevania 4 on OPL3 back in October 2023. Not only is it an amazing tune, plus the fact that I infused the Super Nintendo original and the Sharp X68000 version, but I am still happy with how the organ patch turned out for that cover. Here's another question from Subsuming Vortex. The most infuriating chip I've ever composed for? I'll probably say the VIC-1 chip from the Commodore VIC-20, mainly due to how VIC Tracker 2.0, which is a native VIC-20 music tracker, handled note placement and note cuts. If I remember correctly, there were many times that I got very frustrated while trying to use this program. Like the Plotagon version of my Elfsona mentioned in the previous Q&A video from 2021, this experience had put me off of using native music trackers for a while. Jay Look asks, which one is your favorite, FM, PSG, Wavetable, or PCM? I am someone who likes to find stuff from a subjective point of view, and all of these are unique in their own way, but if I were to place each sound type in order of how much I enjoy them, FM would come first, then Wavetable, then PCM, and PSG last. Not that there's anything wrong with your good old 50% square wave, you can make really good stuff with them. I just don't use them very often. And now, we got 2 more questions from Mega. The first one they asked is if I like Diffel Mask or Furnace Tracker. Honestly, I got spoiled by the features of Furnace to ever go back to Diffel Mask. Also, I don't wish to mention why I stopped using Diffel Mask out of respect for its creator and the team behind it. As for this question, well, the best way I can answer this is that in order for a chicken to exist, it must come out of an egg first, which in turn must come out of a chicken, and so on and so forth. I believe we call this a catch-22 scenario, which Merriam-Webster defines as a problematic situation for which the only solution is defined by a circumstance inherent in the problem or by a rule. RMS, aka Rigid Adams, asks who I consider the closest throughout these years as a musician online. Well, the first one who comes to mind is Markbot, aka Captain Cadence, who, through her live streams she did back in 2018, really helped me to understand how FM synthesis works on the YM2612, and we had talked a lot some years back. Another person who comes to mind is Toby Comey, whose songs I tended to cover a lot when I was a newcomer to the chiptune community back in 2017. I'll also mention you as well, RMS, since your songs are one of my inspirations for how I utilize the Sega Genesis chipset. I could mention a few more, but that could take me a long time to do. Admittedly, most of the folks I used to talk to a lot several years ago aren't as active online these days, which could be due to the fact that we tend to take on more responsibilities in real life as we grow older, something I can attest to since I work a job in real life to support myself and my family financially. Here's another question from Dark Shamil Khan. He asks, what's your favorite chip you've worked on? I got to say, the OPL3 is very flexible for what you can do with a 2-op FM synthesizer. 8 different waveforms for the modulator and carrier, 18 channels, stereo, albeit hard panning, and a 4-op feature which makes it an absolute joy to work with. As such, it is my favorite chip that I have ever worked on, with the YM2612 coming behind it. Another question by Leafy Potato Style says, is cereal a soup? I'll probably say yes and no. Soup is a liquid food with solid ingredients, so cereal and milk could qualify as soup. However, if you look at the definition of soup, it says that it's usually served hot and tends to have savory ingredients, whereas the milk in your cereal is usually cold, and most cereals have sugar in them. I do know that cold soups exist though. Ultimately, I'll leave it up to you if you consider cereal a soup or not. What I think is the most important movie of all time? I will admit, this question threw me for a bit of a loop since I am not much of a movie person. I could say the most important movie could be any one where it has a message of accepting life for how it is, even the hard parts. Such films include It's a Wonderful Life, the various film adaptations of A Christmas Carol, and Pixar's Soul. And that's pretty much the best answer I can give for this one. What is the most infuriating game I have ever played? The Game Boy Color port of Marble Madness, which I played in an emulator back in 2014. The controls were absolute trash, even with slowdowns and frame skips, as it felt like the marble needed to take a few more frames before it can change directions, which made it frustrating to navigate the tighter spots in the later levels. Last question from Subsuming Vortex is, if you were to choose one game to play, one song to listen to, and one dish to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be? For the game to play the rest of my life, I'll go with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Switch. As for a song, I'll choose one song from the Innervation album I mentioned earlier called Ascension, which I have as a standalone in my non-chiptune inspirations playlist. And as the dish to eat for the rest of my life, as a Puerto Rican, I wouldn't mind eating rice and beans every day. Netkill asks, if you can make music with any sound chip, what would it be? And it has to be only one. I'll go with the OPL3. Building upon my answer from a previous question, you can make sounds on the OPL3 that are distinct from, let's say, the YM2612. Plus, as heard with the amazing song Crystal Oscillator by Automata Labs, you can almost make it sound like a DAW. Formula Zero EX asks about my favorite piece of work I've made so far. Now, I've mentioned my best cover that I have ever made, so I will mention an original song of mine, and that would be a Sega Genesis song I wrote in 2021 called In My Dreams of Pure Randomness. I wrote this song for an album by Chiptunes for Autism, which is a non-profit organization that aims to promote neurodiversity through the power of chiptunes. I very much enjoyed making this song, and the aim was to capture how random my dreams tend to be whenever I sleep at night. Spring Enterprises gave me 3 questions. The first one they asked me is, how do you deal with capturing certain emotions in music? So this is something I had actually learned recently when I was asked to create a song for a specific scene in Chords, which is a Mega Drive homebrew game in development since 2023. I know that minor chords are great if you want to convey the emotion of sadness in a song, and it was also in making that song, which I can't share by the way, that I also wanted to convey the emotion of anger. I had found that using sharp, low notes combined with mellow chords and a soft lead along with a moderately slow tempo can help to convey the emotions of anger and sadness in a song. I also learned that it helps to reference songs from games and/or movies to see how the composers went about capturing certain emotions for their scenes. As for other emotions like celebrating or being rushed, I mostly go by feel and decide if I need to change some things about it. And speaking of other emotions, how do you write songs that are happy? I believe the major scale would be great for that. As far as I know, major chords are often used to create songs with a cheery and upbeat tone, especially if you're making something that's meant to be for the little ones in the world. Perhaps the most cheery scale I can think of is the C major scale, which I think is also a commonly used scale. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. This basically uses all the white keys in an octave of a keyboard, ignoring the sharps/flats entirely. Finally, for your question on if I think chiptune is close to pure machine generation, I'd say it depends on who you ask. For me, I've heard some FM synth tunes in particular where the patches sounded so much like samples, it sounded like I was listening to a PCM tune, and I can think of a few FM synth masters that come to mind in that regard. Since my stuff tends to be more synthetic, for lack of a better term, I'd say it's somewhere between human-made and machine-generated. Technically, when you work with sound chips, you basically program something for the chip in particular to generate sound and make it play music. Alright, and that's all the questions that were asked to me. I think I got more questions for this session than my first one, and I very much enjoyed answering each of them. Thanks to everyone who asked me questions and to anyone who watches this video. Remember folks, you are all amazing and are worth more than you think you are. Alright then, see you another time.